Jury selection has begun in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. He potentially faces decades in prison, but there can be challenges seating a jury in such a high-profile case.
Oh, I've been waiting for this. Oh, boy, I've been waiting for this. What's up, Mitch?
Hey, yo. Thanks for tuning in to The Source, your source for celebrity news. Check this out. As you already know, the P. Diddy trial started the other day. In the first phase of the trial is jury selection. According to people who were in the courtroom, they say that P. Diddy walked in rocking a blue cardigan, white shirt, blue slacks, and a pair of loafers. But he seemed to be nervous, and the first thing that he did was look over at the jury pool and smile at all of the 50 potential jurors that were sitting in the courtroom. Now, after Diddy looked at the jurors, he turned around and hugged all of his attorneys. Then he sat down, and that's when the judge essentially just broke down all of the rules for the trial. After that, the questioning began, and each one of the potential 50 jurors who were sitting in the courtroom were brought up one by one in chronological order and asked the following questions. 1. What's your name? 2. What's your age? 3. What's your sex? And 4. What is your gender identity? Alright, so seem like basic questions, but I can guarantee you that P. Diddy's attorneys are going to be looking for people who don't have a problem with other people who swing both ways, whereas the prosecution is most likely going to be looking for the most conservative people that they can possibly find. I also believe that P. Diddy's attorneys are going to try to find people in the age range of like 40 and 55. Why? Because they want those people who were around when Biggie, Toto, Lil' Kim, Craig Mack, Mace, and the Lox were banging in the clubs. In other words, they want that 1990 to 1998 Howard University homecoming crowd. You know what I'm talking about. Because those are the people who are most likely going to have some sort of affinity for P. Diddy. Because those are the people who watched P. Diddy's career from the beginning. I mean, they watched him dancing behind Father MC and Stacey Lattisaw with the Gumby flat top all the way to the point where he became a billionaire.
Black people, please make some motherfucking noise! Yeah. Nobody else. What's up, baby? Yeah, what's up, baby? Yeah. Right there, check your box, bitch. Yeah, throw that on. Throw that junior box on.
With that being said, I also believe that P. Diddy's attorneys are going to be scouring that jury pool looking for men, because what they really don't want is female jurors who are very sympathetic to Cassie. However, the following attorney disagrees with me because he believes that what Diddy really wants is women on that jury, because he believes that women are more likely than men to side with Diddy.
Gender is always an interesting issue in any sort of sexual assault case where the defense is consent. This isn't a case where he jumped out of a bush and attacked something, right? That's a totally different thing. Jurors are going to have to accept that, the alleged victims did these things voluntarily and of their own free will. In consent cases, female jurors can sometimes judge very harshly. If the defense is arguing they voluntarily went into these situations and say, you didn't know what was going to go down in that hotel room, you didn't know what was going to happen at this party, I would have just gotten up and walked out. If you didn't want to be there, why didn't you just walk out? And I think that's going to be a big part of the defense. Male jurors might feel more protective of these alleged victims, view it differently, and feel like they're protecting them in returning a guilty verdict.
Listen, let me know down below. If you were part of Diddy's legal team and you were helping to pick the jury, would you be looking for male jurors or would you be looking for female jurors? And why? Let me know in the comment section below. And while you're down there leaving a comment, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now, after finding out about their sex and their gender, they wanted to know where these people lived and who they lived with. So, the next line of questioning went like this. 4. In what city and county do you live in? 5. Who, if anyone, do you live with? 6. If you're married or in a relationship, what is your spouse's or partner's occupation and employer? And how long have they worked for that employer or been in that occupation? What's their job responsibilities? And 7. Do you have any children? If so, what are their ages? And if you have adult children, what, if anything, do they do for work? Alright, so right here, they're trying to find out if any of these people are connected to or affiliated with anybody who could potentially compromise the case. Alright, so based on the question of like, where do you live? Let me ask you guys a question. If you're P. Diddy, do you try to find people who were born and raised in New York, or do you try to find people who moved to New York from places like Oklahoma, Utah, Nevada, or Ohio? Alright, so the next question was about employment, and it basically had 8 parts, A through E. And they wanted to know, are you currently working? And A, if you are working, who's your current and most recent employer, and what's your job title? B, if you're not working, when was the last time you worked? And please, describe your most recent employment and what your specific duties for that job were. C, if you are working, what do you do for a living and what are your specific duties on the job? And D, how would you describe your job responsibilities? And last but not least, E, do you manage or supervise others as part of your job? I don't know, this one's tough, because if you're Diddy's attorneys and you're looking at that jury, do you go high, middle, or low? Meaning, do you try to find somebody who has a very good job, who has a little money of their own, or do you try to find yourself a middle-class worker, or do you try to find yourself somebody who's been unemployed for a minute? Alright, so after that, they tried to gauge the level of education that each juror had, and they asked, what is the highest level of education that you've completed? And if you have any college or postgraduate degrees, what was your degree or area of study? And then the attorneys went on to say, I'm going to read you a list of occupational areas. Please tell me if you or someone you're very close to has any training experience or specialized knowledge in that area, and explain your or their experience. A, business. B, actual assault training. C, actual harassment training. D, domestic violence training. E, case psychiatry/psychology. F, security services. G, addiction treatment or counseling. H, finance. I, law or enforcement. Okay, so after that, they wanted to find out about the jurors' extracurricular activities, and they asked, what clubs, groups, or organizations do you belong to or regularly participate in? For example, church groups, professional organizations, volunteer activities, victims' rights groups, etc. A, if you have a spouse or partner, what clubs, groups, or organizations does your spouse or partner belong to regularly or participate in? And then they asked a series of questions which included, what do you do with your free time? What are your hobbies or interests outside of work and family? Do you use social media platforms? If yes, which one? How do you get your news? What, if any, newspapers, magazines, websites, online news services, or publications do you read most often? And then, do you listen to any podcast? If so, which ones? See, this is where I think they're going to run into a little problem, because I have a feeling that there are a whole lot of Instagrammers and TikTokers who were sitting in that jury voir dire just lying. Somebody in that jury pool understands that after this is all over, this could potentially be a payday, and they're lying their behinds off to try to get into that jury. Next, the attorneys tried to find out the decision-making styles of each juror. So they said, I'm going to read 3 group decision-making styles, and I'd like you to tell me which one comes closest to the way you make decisions. 1. Do you strongly express your views to get the outcome you believe is best, or do you participate in the discussion and try to help build a consensus? Listen and follow to what you think the majority favors. And then after that, they said, do you believe you make most decisions based on intuition or the examination of facts? Oh my goodness, these questions are killing me, because it's very obvious what you need to say if you're trying to get on or off the jury. I mean, if you're trying to get on, you sit there and you say you like to build consensus with your peers. But if you're trying to get off, you sit there and say, I don't be listening to no facts, I just be going by intuition. Now, at some point during the voir dire, P. Diddy was over there getting real nervous. So he asked the judge if he could take a bathroom break. And the judge was like, do you really need to take a bathroom break? And he was like, Your Honor, I'm nervous. So the judge let him go to the bathroom. He diddled in the bathroom for 2 minutes, and then he came back, sat down, and the voir dire continued. Now, this is when the attorneys wanted to know what the jurors thought about alcoholism and drug abuse. So they said, do you have any personal experiences or opinions about drug or alcohol use or addiction? If yes, what's that experience? B, you're going to hear a lot about drug use and illegal alcohol use in this trial. Is that going to be difficult for you based on your experience? Alright, so essentially what this tells me is that during the trial, both the prosecution and Diddy's defense is going to be telling us how Diddy was over there snorting mounds of cocaine. And then the attorneys flipped the script because they wanted to know what each one of these jurors felt about people being filthy rich. And they said, the defendant in this case is a wealthy celebrity. Do you have any opinions regarding wealthy individuals that would affect your ability to serve as a fair and impartial juror in this case? Do you believe that wealthy people get away with things that less wealthy people don't? And then after that, they wanted to know what kind of music each person in the jury listened to. So they were like, what kind of music do you like? How often do you listen to music? Do you have an opinion about the hip-hop rap music industry or artists in that genre? If so, tell us what it is. Yo, I'm sitting here wondering, if I was on a jury pool and they asked me that question and I was like, yeah, I have an opinion on the hip-hop and rap industry and a couple of artists in it, and my opinion is that Diddy can't rap and his black behind should have stopped putting all of his kindergarten nursery rhyme rap bars on everybody's songs in the 90s. What do you think? Do you think they would keep me or would they send me packing? Alright, so during the voir dire, the attorneys also went over the charges against Diddy because they wanted to make sure that each one of these potential jurors understood exactly what Diddy's being charged with. So the attorney said, this is a criminal case. To help you understand the reason for the questions I'll be asking you, I want to tell you briefly about the charges. The defendant, Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, has been charged with the commission of certain federal crimes in a document called an indictment, filed by the grand jury sitting in this district. The indictment is not evidence itself. It simply contains the charges that the government is required to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. I'll be briefly summarizing the charges in this case in order to give you a legal framework as you listen to the evidence for what you will ultimately be asked to do at the end of the trial. The indictment contains 5 counts or charges. Count 1 charges that from at least in or about 2004 through in or about 2024, the defendant participated in a racketeering conspiracy during which he agreed with other employees and associates of his business to commit kidnapping, arson, bribery of a witness, obstruction of justice, drug distribution, forced labor, trafficking, and transportation for the purposes of engaging in prostitution. Count 2 charges the defendant with trafficking of an adult female victim through force, fraud, and coercion between in or about 2008 and in between to or about 2018. Count 3 charges the defendant with transporting that female victim and male commercial ex-workers to engage in prostitution between in or about 2009 and in or about 2018. Count 4 charges the defendant with trafficking a second adult female victim through force, fraud, and coercion between in or about 2021 and in or about 2024. Count 5 charges the defendant with transporting that second female victim and male commercial ex-workers to engage in prostitution between in or about 2021 and in or about 2024. Okay, so we all know that Cassie's the first person who's going to get up on that stand and say that Diddy trafficked her. But who's this second person? Who is this mysterious woman who's getting ready to get up on that stand and testify that P. Diddy trafficked her between 2021 and 2024? Because by that time, Diddy and Cassie were long over. So, who is this person? Okay, so after that, the attorneys basically asked the potential jurors about their general ability to serve, and they asked 1. Would you have any difficulty following my instructions with respect to the fundamental principles I've just outlined? 2. Do you have any personal knowledge of the charges in the indictment as I've just described them beyond what you've already noted in your questionnaire? 3. It's not a particularly pleasant duty to find another person guilty of committing a crime. If the evidence established the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, would you be willing to share? 4. Unable to render a guilty verdict for reasons unrelated to the law and evidence. And if the evidence failed to establish the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, would you be unable to render a not guilty verdict for reasons unrelated to the law and the evidence? And 5. Is there any reason you cannot view and decide fairly and impartially a case involving the charges as I have described it that you have not already noted in your questionnaire? Next, the attorney went on to ask each one of the potential jurors whether or not they knew anybody, and I mean anybody, who was involved in the trial. For example, they said the conduct of the trial will be in the immediate charge of Assistant United States Attorney Maureen Comey, Meredith Foster, Emily Johnson, Christy Slavic, Madison Smizer, and Mitzi Steiner. They'll assist the HSI Special Agent Sean Quinn, HSI Special Agent Kiera Murphy, and HSI Task Force Officer Phil Adazawinski, as well as Shannon Beck, Rebecca, Lucy Gavin, and Chanel Foster, paralegal specialists in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And then the attorney asked all of those people to stand up and asked everybody in the jury, do you know any of those people? After that, they went on to say, are you familiar with anyone else present in the courtroom, including all court personnel or myself? Did you recognize any of your fellow jurors in the jury assembly room? Next, the attorney went on to say, I'm going to hand you a list of names of individuals who may be mentioned during the trial or who may be witnesses in the case. Please read the list to yourself and please do not say the names out loud. Okay, so at that point, we didn't know who the celebrities were, but now we know who some of them are. And the names included Kanye West, Michael B. Jordan, Mike Myers, Kid Cudi, Dawn Richard, Michelle Williams from Destiny's Child, Lauren London, and Dallas Austin.
So I'm just leaving federal court on a very rainy day of jury selection, day one for the Sean Combs trial. The judge is hoping to see about 40 jurors so that they can narrow it down. 18 is the magic number. They need 12 jurors and 6 alternates. Combs acknowledged that he was nervous, and legal experts that I spoke to said this is by far the most important part of this entire process because his fate will be in the hands of those jurors. So something that stood out to me today is that the jurors were given a list of people and places, and the judge wanted to know how familiar they are with these places, with these people, and there were some celebrities that were mentioned in court. Michael B. Jordan, Michael Myers, Kanye West, Michelle Williams of Destiny's Child. It is unclear in what context this might actually come up in the trial, but I definitely thought it was interesting.
Now, the first thing I want to say is bear in mind that just because their name was mentioned doesn't mean that they were complicit in some illegal activity. For example, Michael B. Jordan was mentioned because of the relationship that he had with Cassie, where Diddy allegedly threatened him. The same type of thing goes for Michelle Williams, obviously for Cassie Ventura, and Kid Cudi, he allegedly blew up his car. Now, as for why Mike Myers and some of the others were mentioned, they haven't given us those reasons yet. Now, at the end of the day yesterday, after interviewing over 50 potential jurors, 19 moved forward, and all of them are in the age range of 30 to 75 years old. Now, going into today, they've already dismissed 5 potential jurors, with only one so far having made it to the next round. One of them was dismissed because he said that he believed that Diddy could buy his way out of jail.
Okay, so shortly after giving each one of the potential jurors a list of all of the celebrities that may be named during this trial, the attorneys asked each one of the jury members if they had any affiliation with any law offices or government offices. And then they went on to ask them about whether or not they have any friends or they themselves have been involved in any criminal proceedings. For example, they said, have you or any close relative ever been subject to any investigation or accusation by any grand jury, state or federal, or any other investigation? If so, is there anything about that experience that would prevent you from acting as a fair and impartial juror in this case? So right here is basically when the one juror was like, yeah, I stole a Harry Potter magic wand from Universal Studios back in the day, and they caught me, and I had to pay them back, and I was also banned from Universal Studios for a year. Oh my goodness, you can't make this stuff up. Anyhow, the attorneys proceeded on to ask questions such as, have you or any of your relatives or close friends ever been the victim of a crime? If yes, please describe the circumstances, including the type of crime, when it happened, and the outcome of any law enforcement action. Is there anything about that experience that could affect your ability to be fair and impartial in this case? And then they also said, you may hear evidence in the case relating to acts of violence, including intimate partner violence and other assaults. Do you have any feelings, beliefs, or experiences related to that aspect of the case that could affect your ability to be fair and impartial in this case?
The judge has also been asking if any of these potential jurors have had traumatic events in the past that might make it difficult for them to listen to some of the testimony that is expected in this trial. Now, the first prospective juror that was questioned this morning, a woman, she said that she was the victim of an attempted rape in the Bronx. So the judge further questioned her on that and asked, if she'd be tempted to side with these alleged victims or if she could keep an open mind. And she did indicate that she'd be able to stay unbiased, and that is exactly what they are looking for in these potential jurors.
Next, they asked, you may hear evidence in this case related to sexual assault, including R. Do you have any feelings, beliefs, or experiences related to that aspect of the case that could affect your ability to be fair and impartial in this case? And then last but not least, they said, you may hear evidence in this case relating to the payment of commercial ex-workers in exchange for sex. Do you have any feelings, beliefs, or experiences related to prostitution and the enforcement of laws around prostitution that could affect your ability to be fair and impartial in this case? So there you have it. These are all the questions that all of the potential jurors were asked on day one of the Diddy trial, and they'll continue to repeat these questions in groups of 50 till they get through all 150 potential jurors that they brought in during days 1 through 3. Listen, let me know down below. If you're the prosecution, what type of juror are you looking for? And if you're Diddy and you're trying to get off scot-free, what kind of juror are you looking for? Do you want the 20-year-old suburban white guy, the 20-year-old black guy, the 35-year-old housewife from Long Island, the 55-year-old Asian dude from Flushing, the 67-year-old OG from Harlem who's still dressing like he's watching a Mac? Or do you want the 50-year-old black woman from Queens? Let me know in the comments, and while you're down there leaving a comment, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends. Hey yo, thanks for tuning in to The Source, your source for celebrity news. Peace.